Okay, can we come to order, please? Come to order, please. Welcome to our Jacksontown Meeting 2024. We come together to make decisions about our community, a tradition that is older than our state itself. As we deliberate, let us advocate for our positions in a civil manner. Remember that in the end, having respect for one another in Jackson is of far greater importance than any differences we may have. Before we say our pledge, I'd like to have a moment of silence for those that have passed since last we met. Thank you. All rise for the pledge, please. After which Judy Boston is going to lead us in one stanza of God Bless America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Judy? God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home. Thank you, Jim. I'll start by reading the results of the election. Frank DeFuscio has been elected selectman with 239 votes. Helen Wasco has been elected library trustee with 120 votes. Darlene Francie, 115 votes. Jerry Dockery, moderator, 119 votes. Trustee of the funds, Helene Macheski, 127 votes. Trustee of the Cemeteries, Noah Weider, 128 votes. Supervisor of the Checklist, Christopher Bridge, 127 votes. School Board for 3 years, Dr. James Glazier, 120 votes. And Jessica DeValia, also for the School Board, 120. The article for the Planning Board passed 117 votes, so it's approved. Can everyone hear?
There's a question.
Your first number that you read, we didn't have that many voters.
It was 119.
I didn't have my glasses on. I'll read it again.
119.
Frank DeFuscio, 119. Helen Wasco, 120. Library Trustee. Library Trustee Darlene Ferenc, 115 votes. Moderator Jerry Doherty, 119 votes. Trustee of the Funds, Helen Macheski, 127 votes. Trustee of the Cemetery, Noah Weider, 128 votes. Supervisor of the Checklist, Christopher Bridge with 127 votes. School Board, they're voting for 2. Dr. James Glazier, 120. Jessica DeValia, 122. The Planning Board article passed 117 votes to 13 votes. Everybody got it? I'd like to go over a couple of the procedural rules that we'll follow. You've all checked in with the supervisor checklist and you've all gotten cards. That's how we'll vote. In favor of, opposed, raise your arms. And then we'll count them, the select body will count them. The way that I'll handle the articles will be considered as follows. The article number will be announced and read as presented in full. I will then seek a person to move and second the consideration of the article, which, to help Karen, our town clerk, to record who it is, I've asked Willis Kelly to move it and David Campbell to second it. You all can do whatever you like other than that, but that's what we'll officially say for the right to know laws. Upon being moved and seconded, a person, generally a select person, will be recognized to explain the articles. For example, the operating budget. The article will then be placed on the floor for discussion and vote. All votes will be, as I said, by a show of hands. And with respect to speakers, if I recognize you, please come up to the microphone. If you can't come to the microphone, Greg will hand you a microphone to speak. But this allows everyone to hear and to Karen properly record the discussion. I'll call a limit of 5 minutes per speaker. If there's an article to amend after the article has been read, someone can call a point of order and amend an article if they like to. With respect to a secret ballot, any 5 voters may require a vote by secret ballot. To do so, all 5 voters must be present, stand and be identified. The request must be presented in writing to me at the end of the debate of the article in question. And I can vote on any article, but I intend to only vote to break a tie or to make a vote a tie vote if the motion is one that I oppose. Any questions about any of that? Yes, sir? Can everybody hear? Thank you, sir.
Yes, my name is Sarah Clements, and my question to you is, I'm not sure if this is the time to ask or at the end of the meeting, but we all were, at this last Tuesday's voting, we used our new system. So we all saw how we presented our license, got our ticket, and voted. I'm just curious because I want to know what happened at 7 o'clock when you counted the ballots. And I'm unfamiliar with it. I don't know if other people here are familiar with what happens when the ballot closes with the new machinery, how it's handled.
I'll have, I overlooked in introducing our head table, Frank DeFuscio, Barbara Campbell, Bob Thompson, and our attorney,
Jason Dennis.
Jason Dennis, thank you. And Karen, would you want to speak to that? Thank you.
At the microphone.
think I'm not gonna get that. I'm not gonna get rid of that, so.
At 7 o'clock, when we closed the polls, it was a simple procedure. Jerry announced that the polls were closed. Then we went over and removed certain cards on USB that was in that one device. It doesn't connect to my laptop. At that point, I invited anyone who happened to be here at 7 o'clock. We had some volunteers ready to count if we needed to. New device, just want to be careful. And we stood up on stage, and they were behind me, and at that point, we started the process of running reports. As soon as, by the way, before we pulled out the USB card, we were able to print one report immediately, and it was all the ballots that was counted that moment, except for any write-ins. So it was instantaneous within 30 seconds. Once we went up on the stage, we started dealing with all the write-ins. I got allocated them, and we had the official ballots at 7:27, not hours later.
Thank you, Karen. I would like to start by having a motion to dispense with reading the entire warrant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Cards? Thank you. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, Article 3, operating budget. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the select board's recommended operating budget of the town in the amount of $3,055,118, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and appropriations voted separately. It was recommended by the select board 3-0.
Second.
I'll now recognize the select board to discuss the operating budget.
Okay, I think most of you that were here last year will remember how quickly we came and went over the budget. So this year we're going to be reading each section and the total of that budget and allow for anyone that has questions or comments. So if you do have a question on that section, Jerry will recognize you and you can come up to the microphone and ask your question and then we'll answer it. So the first section is the Selectmen Department, and their 2024 proposed budget is $35,022. Are there any questions? I'd also like to note that there are comments under most, if not all, of the sections, so please read those if you need some clarification on a few of the different items. Oh, does everyone know we're on page 18 of the town report? Okay. The second section is the town clerk department. The 2024 proposed budget is $108,901. Any questions? The third area is the financial administration department with a total of $227,422. Any questions? The next area is the assessing, which holds steady at $44,000. Questions? The legal department, $35,000, which is same as last year's budget. Jason, don't think you can use that. Questions? Personnel administration, the amount for 2024 is $570,177. Are there any questions on that? The next area is the planning and zoning boards at $11,000, same as 2023. The next area is general government parks and buildings, $44,500 for the year. Questions? The next section is the cemeteries at $12,000. Insurance at $90,731. Any questions? The building inspection department at $81,024. The next section is the police department at $377,135. Questions? All right. The ambulance department at $61,540.
Sorry, Ann. There was a hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry. Do you want to stand up then and come up to the microphone? And that way we won't miss, which section were we on then?
We were at the police department.
Okay,
And I came to the pre-budget meeting, Sarah Clemens,
yes,
and it was stated that we now have 2 full-time police officers, is that correct?
correct.
And 1 part-time?
Not at this time.
Not
We
at
have
this
an
time.
opening in our department.
But in this section, we have allocated for a 3rd police officer.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that.
Yes, thank you. Okay. And again, back to the ambulance department, were there any questions on the 61,540? Fire department, $229,339. Questions? All right. The emergency management department, $13,801. The highway administration, and this is for the wages only, is $275,564. And then the highway department above that is $455,962. Are there any questions? Okay. Solid waste disposal, $149,627. Animal control, $500. Public welfare, $6,000. The library budget is $146,200. Any questions? All right. And other conservation is $1,500. The next section is other culture and recreation, $10,500. Parks and Recreation, $6,700. Debt service is $60,973. And that brings the total operating budget to $3,055,119, a 10.28% increase from 2023. Do I have any questions on the whole budget?
I'll reread it. Article 3, operating budget. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the select board's recommendation operating budget to the town in the amount of $3,055,118, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Article 4, appropriations to capital reserve funds. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $175,500 to be placed in the capital reserve funds previously established. Number 1, $95,000 to the road reconstruction capital reserve fund 0064. Current balance is $19,179. 2, $50,000 to the Bartlett Jackson Ambulance Capital Reserve Fund 0070. Current balance is $75,335. Number 3, $15,500 to the Police Cruiser Capital Reserve Fund 0027. Current balance is $55,998. Number 4, $15,000 to the Solar Energy Capital Reserve Fund 0072. Current balance is $59,623. Can I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? The select
Any
board?
questions on these? Sarah? You should sit there.
My question to you is, at the preliminary hearing for the budget, I asked the question as to the solar panels that we now have in town, what the feedback was on that and what we were getting from it and so on and so forth. And I said it was supposed to be answered at the second meeting, but it was not, so I'm asking you here.
Thank you. I do not have an answer for that for you, so I'm gonna make a note, put a star by it, and I will have that at the March 26th meeting. And I assume, let's just rephrase it, you wanna know how much, if any, the town is saving on our bills now because of the solar installation. I will have that on March 26th.
It is doing what we were told. it would.
Right. Thank you for raising that again.
Dad?
Yes,
The question.
Mike for the name?
When someone yells out "Dad," you know it's a small town.
Yeah.
Anyway, my name is Tish Hamlin, and I just had a couple of questions, not particularly about this warrant, but warrants in general. And one is a question, the budget, which you said went up by 10%. I wanted to know how much that affects the tax rate. Because I saw that if we vote yes on all of the warrant articles, that our taxes municipal side will go up 45%. And I think that really, I mean, I was at one of the budget meetings, I couldn't make the other, but that's significant. So I think people need to understand that that's what's happening. But also wanted to understand too that it seems, I know it came up at one of the meetings, that we don't have capital reserve funds for many of our buildings. So I don't know what is gonna happen. Are you addressing any of that in any of these budgets, or is that something for a later date that we can expect to affect taxes more?
We do have one warrant article, thank you for
Okay.
those great points, but we do have one, Article 9 for the library maintenance and repairs expendable trust fund that we're starting this year, if it gets voted, to start for repairs and maintenance. But you're right, we don't have anything for any of the other town-owned buildings, and normally we do have expendable trust funds or capital reserve funds for the town assets. So that is something that we will be looking at for next year's town meeting, and really trying to establish the amount, the need, the age of the buildings, et cetera. So that will be probably a year from now, but it will be discussed in upcoming select meetings. Do you feel like answering your first question, because I know you have a good feel for how the budget affects the tax rate? You answered it eloquently at one of the other meetings.
I think you were referring to the tax bill raise this year and different breakdowns. Is that what you were referring to?
And on page 28 is where I believe the totals are, where it states that the projected percentage increase would be 45% if all were approved and all else stayed the same, and we didn't use any of the our general fund balance.
Yeah, our unexpended fund balance is what we typically get into every year to manage that rate increase. And this year, we added $250,000 of it to offset what we felt was a larger than we wanted to see increase. And that's typically done in December, once we know exactly where we're at. So the unexpended fund balance is really what we use to manage those kinds of rate increases. We have, I think, $1.2 million right now in that fund, and there are percentages that are recommended to not dip below. You want that insurance policy to have to manage expenditures that can't be foreseen. For example, we almost went over budget in the fire department when we had the December 19th flood that required us to get the rolling equipment out and close down the town and deal with roads that were washed out. But we didn't go over, but if we had, that would have been an example of how we would have used the unexpended fund balance for that.
And as you can see, we have $1 million just about that we could tap into next October, November, and start putting on the tax rate that's been lower.
Can you speak up?
Yeah, sorry, microphone.
We have approximately $1 million in the fund balance, and as Bob mentioned, next October, November, we set the tax rate. Then we look at how much we can use of that safely to lower the tax rate, so that it won't be a 45% increase like you saw. Okay.
And one other thing I do want to say too is, I'll call it a luxury of knowing ahead of time that before we set our tax rate, we do know what the the other portions of the tax component are. So like, for example, what went up this year, or your sheet there, were the other components of the tax rate. So the state rate went up 43%, the county went up 12%, and the school went up 15%, and our local rate went up only 3.5%. So we were able to bring it down from a substantial increase to just a 3.5% increase on the town's value, or the town's portion of that. We don't know what's going to happen, especially when it comes to the school and the state situation. But we do really count ourselves fortunate in having a fund balance that we can use to bring the tax rate down. I hope that helps answer it, but I also agree with you that this is not a snapshot, that one thing should be taken into consideration at a time. When you're considering all of these matters, the whole amount that we're approving tonight affects the tax rate in one way or another. If we're doing a $3 million budget, plus you vote positively for all of the other warrant articles that have money involved, it would be a lot more than $3 million that we're allocating to the town to be responsible for this year. So please digest that. Any, Kev?
Thank you, Ken.
Ken Kimball, if I understand this correctly, the projected tax rate is probably conservatively high because your tax assessed value is based on this past year. Real estate values in the state have gone up over 10 to 15% in this past year. Plus you've had new construction, so the denominator here actually should be much higher than what it actually is, which means the tax rate that's being showed at $7.15 will probably be considerably less than that once you take in the new assessment values.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Yeah, that and the fact that we are having a revaluation year,
Right,
so the
right.
property values, but at the end of the day, if your property value goes up and the tax rate goes down, you're still going to be hit with an increase. We just don't know what that is right now. Jason Call, our assessor, came to a select meeting and did talk to us about the fact that our property values, some property values could increase by 50%. And we did that as sort of an eye-opener that says, beware, please don't be as shocked tomorrow as you are today hearing it, because it will.
But that would mean your assessed value per thousand, instead of being $7.15,
Correct.
will probably come down to something like $6 or something like that, if I was doing the math.
It'd be nice if it came out.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true.
So it's somewhat misleading because it's based on, it's not actually an apples to apples comparison.
It's a projected amount.
It is a projected, but it's based on a number in the denominator, which is actually artificially made.
Correct.
Valuation years typically have a third of the properties go up beyond the average valuation, a third of the properties go up below the average valuation, and a third are right in the center there. So so that's the formula where some people's actual tax bill in dollars will go down, some will go up, and some will stay right about where they are on any typical tax valuation year. Because your property values go up, but the amount of money we're spending as a town does not.
Tish, did I, Jerry?
Jerry Doherty. First, I just want to correct, it's a pet peeve of mine when moderators and chairs ask for questions. We can also, most of us know this here, but maybe not all of us know, you can also make comments. It's not just questions that you can ask.
Thank you.
What currently is the undesignated fund balance?
Today?
Today.
991,000.
Yeah.
Which I want
Yeah.
well, just barely, almost a million.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, 991,596. That is the balance at 12/31/2023.
Actually, what was the balance on January 1st?
991,596.
Because it was different than what it was on December 31st. At least it should be. It can't be the same on December 30th. I mean, it can be, but that would be a pretty free thing.
Right, I don't have that number today.
So what was the number on January 1st 2024.
I don't have that number.
You don't currently know what the undesignated fund balance is. No, that's what it was on December 31st. It's
Right.
no longer that. What gets contributed to that is what you didn't spend in 2024, and in 2023. About 1.2, but you don't know what it is exactly yet. Okay. That's a little bit shameful, but, well, it's always been known before by this time of year. And I understand that the transitions this year might have made that difficult, but we should know today what the fund balance actually is, not what it was on December 31st. Because I do suspect that we do have some wiggle room to use a large portion of the fund balance. And to me, the responsible way to use that isn't to mitigate the tax rate hikes for things that are going to be recurring into the tax rate. It's great to use for things like the 254, the fire station, or the 394, the station. Those are one-time expenses that we're going to see. So if you use the undesignated fund balance on a one-time expense, it doesn't affect the tax rate for the following year. If you use it for things that are going to be recurring expenses, then all you're doing is mitigating when we're actually going to be paying more. When it comes to the reevaluation, for most of us, that's not going to affect how much we actually pay. So what we actually pay in taxes for what you're asking for will increase what we actually pay by 44%. For most of us. For some of us, it might go up a little bit. There might be some winners and losers in the reevaluation as a whole. But for the most part, what you're asking for is a 44% increase in what we're spending. And again, that can very well be mitigated by the undesignated fund balance. And that's what it should be used for, I think, is for one-time expenditures. So that's what I'm commenting. That's my comment, is to recommend that, is that if you use the undesignated fund balance, it should be for one-time expenses.
And just to piggyback on that comment, we have used it in the past very, not as much as we did in the last year, due to the high increases in the tax rate. So we did use it as a to soften the blow of the tax rate. Normally, we don't have to allocate that much of it for that purpose. So I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate the comment. Willis,
And Willis Kelly,
can you come
I
up
hope
to
you
the
can
mic?
hear me.
No?
I'm Willis Kelly. Hope everybody can hear me. I think Jerry kind of hit on what I was going to question and talk about, but as I have understood it for many years, the unreserved fund balance is everything left over on December 31st that hasn't been encumbered on something that we did in 2023, for example. We've paid tax, everybody that's paid a tax bill has theoretically paid their taxes on that money. And I have not checked it this year, Jerry may be able to correct it, but the state of New Hampshire DRA, I believe, recommends somewhere in the vicinity of 9% to a 13.5% range. We have $1 million+. I've kind of heard the comment. That's certainly way beyond what the state recommends. And the second part of this, in past year history, I think, unlike last year, but it always, the state required for you to touch the unencumbered funds, that it required a vote from town meeting. So if that's the case, and you have not designated or warned the people here of your intention of taking some of that money to help some of these things, how do you do it until next town meeting? That's my question. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'll reread them. Article 4. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. You're so tiny.
My comment is, sorry. Thank you, sir. My comment is, I appreciate the fact that we have unencumbered funds and we're using it. But I'm going to say to you, since 2014 to 2024, my tax bills have doubled. So even though we're giving ourselves some money out of our unencumbered funds, I'm just saying every year we get told, oh, it's just a little, oh, it's just a little. But again, my taxes have doubled.
And I'll remind remind you that your taxes are made up of 4 different components. And in your case, I believe it's 5 components, including the water district. So all of the components have not doubled, but some of them have more than doubled. So be sure you're looking at all of the components of your tax bill and attending all of the important meetings for all of the taxable impact that you can have. School board meetings, state meetings, the water precinct meetings, et cetera, because when it comes down to your taxes, all of them are impacted.
I would just like to make a comment that I do attend. I
Yes,
attend
I
the
know.
budget hearings,
Yep.
I attend the school budget hearings, and I also am the only one that attended the water precinct meetings. So thank you all that live in the water precinct, putting that burden on just one person, because nobody showed up.
Jerry?
We have 2 more. And
Hi, Sarah Duffy. Back to Article 4, I was wondering if we could get some information about each component of this, a little detail of why the dollar amount, et cetera. Thank you.
on the, do you want to?
Well, I could speak to the road reconstruction. Everybody's seen what's been happening the last few years with the weather. We have, I split like the ABCs of the highway department: asphalt, bridges, culverts, ditches, and employees. We're focusing on those things. We're gonna have bigger culverts. The roads are gonna need more construction and reconstruction they've had in the past, and we're trying to get ahead of this. But the only way we can do it is by spending money, and spending it now, before it, as you know, what's happening every year. The weather is getting weirder, and we just have to deal with it. So I can explain that for road reconstruction. Jackson Ambulance, well, we're gonna be buying a new ambulance. We've already put one half away last year, right? And we have another, we're putting more this year. Bartlett is also gonna share. And I think in 2026, now we're saying, or 2025.
2026.
Okay, but we're gonna get a new ambulance. Police cruiser, that's, every several years, was Chief here? Chief was right there.
But we put,
Yeah.
we put the same amount in each year to
Yeah.
replace we replace one of the 3 cruisers every 3 to 5 years. And then the last one is the solar energy, which again, we put $15,000 into each year, and we'll look at what to be doing with that on one of the town-owned buildings in the near future. Jerry, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I just want to clarify about the statewide education property tax that you referred to going up. That has no bearing on what we actually pay in taxes. And I guess the simplest way for me to describe that is on our tax bills is $1.87. The school tax portion of the bill, I think, is $4.04, or something close to that anyway.
$4.32 for the local
For
school
the
rate.
local school rate. So if you didn't have that $1.87 from the SLEP on there,
Right.
you would take that $1.87 and add it to the school's $4.32, which would mean the school's tax rate really should be on our tax bills. And what it literally is from the money that the school appropriated would be $4.32 plus $1.87. So it doesn't matter that the state tax went up. That doesn't affect what we actually pay in taxes. All that does is affects what the number for the school is on the tax bill. So our taxes didn't go up because of the state tax. The taxes went up because of increase in the school budget locally, not from the state. So the state tax can be what anything it says. It could be $1.50. It could be, like, for instance, Hart's location in Chatham have negative numbers for the school, the state tax. It's entirely to do with, it's all to do with how much money the school's actually appropriated that year. So the school tax rate should be, what is it, $6.15 or something like that. So that's the portion that went up. It wasn't the state tax.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody else? Okay, I'll reread the article. Article 4, appropriations to capital reserve fund. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate to some $175,500 to be placed in the capital reserve funds previously established. All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Article 5, appropriation to the expendable trust funds, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $182,000 to be placed in the following expendable trust funds previously established. $5,000 to the transfer station expendable trust fund 0028. Current balance is $48,834. $5,000 to the state aid reconstruction expendable trust 0058. Current balance $42,489. 3. $90,000 to the bridge repair expendable trust fund 0034. Current balance $424,488. Number 4, $3,000 to the police department equipment expendable trust fund 0051. Current balance is $1,128. 5, $20,000 to the fire department equipment expendable trust fund 0046. Current balance $5,230. Number 6, $2,000 to the Balloon Road Groundwater Expendable Trust Fund 0071. Current balance is $10,209. $7,000 to the Town Office Equipment Expendable Trust Funds 0047. Current balance is $9,097. Number 8, $50,000 to the Fire Department Expendable Trust Fund 0075. Current balance $38,682. Can I have a motion? Any comment or discussion?
Willis?
Number 2, state aid reconstruction, is it still?
Yeah.
The question I have is on item 2, state aid reconstruction. My question is, does the state still use that $2 for every dollar we spend ratio, or is that gone along with the law of upside?
Sorry. You,
Bill, you might want to sit closer to the front.
That's typically been the ratio, Bill, and it's determined on an annual basis. So every year, our highway department / and road agent connects with the state, and we work that out. But that's typically the ratio.
Any other comments or questions? Jeanette?
Jeanette Hyman. What's the difference between number 5 and number 8? They both talk about fire department equipment and fire department expendable trust funds.
fire department equipment would be like air packs and anything that has to do with uniforms and equipment, versus the fire department expendable trust fund of $50,000 is specifically named for the maintenance of the building, and that can be used. So later we'll be discussing the fire department, the fire station, and this can be used for repairs, etc. on the fire station itself. Does that answer?
Jay, I saw you twitch. Do you have any additions?
I did also want to comment that the bridge amount of $90,000 is it's larger than it has been because we finally got the numbers on the Valley Crossroad Bridge. They're starting that project and it should be completed by mid-November of this year. So look out for signs for that, but that will be the final year for that project. We may still have a bridge repair expendable trust fund, but that is the large amount for that new quote that we have.
Sarah, that was my question. Okay, thank you. Article 5, appropriation to the expendable trust fund, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $182,000 to be placed in the following expendable trust fund previously established. All in favor? Opposed? It passes. Article 5 is adopted. Social services. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,791 to support the following. Number 1, Children Unlimited, $4,000. Number 2, Tri-County Community Action, $2,313. The Gibson Center, $3,000. White Mountain Community Health, $1,506. Conway Area Humane Society, $2,000. Starting Point, $4,256. Northern Human Services, $716. Jackson Chamber of Commerce Fireworks, $4,000. Jackson Chamber of Commerce Beautification Project, $2,000. MWV Supports Recovery, $1,500. Number 11, the Eastern Slope Regional Airport, $500. Recommended by the school board, 3-0. Recommended by the select board, I'm sorry, 3. Yeah, 3-0. Motion to move in second?
Made a motion. So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Sarah?
Sarah Clemens again. I come to the pre-meetings because I think it's important to find out about these NGOs or whatever the term, but you gotta learn all these initials today, and I'm not totally always familiar. But when we're now blocking them together, if they've been here for several years, we're putting them back on the books unless they ask for more money, correct?
They still have to request the money every year, and they do submit financial statements and documentation on the amount that they're substantiating, regardless of whether it's the same amount or not.
Right, and do you get also what their, any other information as to their total budget and how much they spend and what they're given by not only the local towns, but also the federal government, the state government?
I don't think it's that detailed of what we do get, but it is an example of like how many families are served in Jackson,
Right.
type of information, and their financial statements. So I don't believe it's as detailed, but we can talk about that if you want to look at something that's submitted, and we can look at either modifying or
Right.
if it's necessary.
Again, is that something when you get it, that you could post either on the e-news or it could be posted at the town office where someone could see it? I just think that there are so many things that, for transparency, that it would be nice if we knew these details instead of just the amounts. Thank you.
So I appreciate that comment. At some of the other towns in our, neighboring towns, they actually have the budget committees, and I think what we can do probably for next year is bring the information that's submitted for each of the nonprofits to the budget hearings so that it can be recognized and noticed maybe in the handouts that we go over in the first and second budget hearing. So if there are questions, then we can discuss those maybe at the first or second and decide if we want to include them, just ask any more questions of those organizations or whatever.
Is that a hand?
Just to clarify, that's Donna Dunn, just to clarify the information, every one of those nonprofits' tax statements and financial reports are online. You can look them up at any time. It's called a Form 990.
Thank you.
Article 6, social services. Oh, any other questions? Sorry. Article 6, social services. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,791 to support the following. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 7, to establish a Town of Jackson Housing Commission. To see if the town will vote to establish a housing commission pursuant to RSA 674:8 for the proper recognition, promotion, enhancement, encouragement, and development of a balanced and diverse supply of housing to meet the economic, social, and physical needs of the town, viewed in the context of the region within which the town is situated, and to further provide that said housing will consist of 3 members to be appointed by the select board. Recommended 3-0. Planning board was 7-0.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any conversation? Bill?
Good evening. Hi, I'm Bill Terry. I'm chair of the planning board, and we're the sponsors of this warrant article. And the reason we sponsored the warrant article is because of you. We had a facilities committee, and they sent out a nice survey. Number one thing that you guys said we should be spending our money on in town is affordable housing. It was the number one priority. It was the second priority of everybody who said something else was their number one priority. So it was either number one or number two. That's what you said. We got involved with the capital improvement plan program as a follow-up to the facilities committee to determine what kinds of things we should be spending our money on in town. We're not done yet. And you're gonna be asked tonight around some of the expenditures that may or may not come up, but definitely will come up in the next few years. What we're asking is that we can get a few people who are interested in serving the town, try to figure out whether or not we can do this. I don't know if we can do this. We're kind of special. You know we're special. We're a small town. We have high values in our homes. And take a look at the census reports. We don't have high incomes, not on average. Many of you bought your home many years ago when values were less. Some of you are new, maybe you spent big bucks for your house. I know personally, I'm not sure I could afford my home if I were asked to buy it today at the rate that Zillow says it's worth. We're asking young people, people who work in town who don't have mega incomes, they're not coming from California or New York with big bucks in their pocket, whether or not they want to come to live in Jackson. We have no homes available, we have no places available. If we want to get more people into town who are going to be able to man the fire station or sit in those chairs who aren't old like me. We need to get more young people. I'm glad to see a bunch of young people here tonight. We have some really special people in town who actually are interested in doing this job. And I don't know if they're going to be successful. I don't know. But we got to try. Because if we don't try, I don't know, any of you guys, nothing happens if you don't try. So I'm asking and hope you support her.
Sarah Clemens. I would just like to know, is there properties where this type of thing is a reasonable request? As you say, you're going to be asking for money. So do we have properties where this affordable housing can be built?
Sarah, I'm going to answer that. That's part of why the Housing Commission is being established. We kind of, Mary Duguid is on the planning board next to him, so we talk a little bit about it. We do always wonder if there are affordable properties in Jackson, and Jackson is not going to be the solution to solve affordable housing problems. But if there are options, and we can work with other towns and different committees and be that cohesive planning commission, then I think that's where it needs to start. So I don't know of any properties where any affordable housing would be built today in Jackson, but that's what the committee would be really targeted to find out.
Thank you.
Scott? Thank you.
Scott Badger. I don't have much to add to what Bill already said, very eloquent. I'm a lifelong resident. I've seen a very, say, drastic change in the makeup and the dynamic of the community here. I think we've lost lost some of the vitality we've had because we don't have as many young people and young families. I think it's about, we talk about affordable housing, workforce housing. I see it more as community housing. Housing is going to make it a community that we want to live in, and a community that has vitality in life. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I am Andrew Tullis, and I was just wondering about the cost impact of this. Is this linked to number 7 for the 50,000, or would these select people need salaries? Just, is there a cost that is not being disclosed?
No, there is no cost to establishing the housing commission, and Article 8 would be money that we would, if voted, allocate to the housing commission to use for funds. So 7 can be done without 8. Hope it's not.
Article 7, establish the Town of Jackson Housing Commission. In favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 8, establish a housing fund to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $50,000 for a housing fund for the initial funding of the Town of Jackson Housing Commission. If so established, with this amount to come from the general taxation, and further to name the treasurer as custodian of the funds to expend said housing fund consistent with RSA 674:44-J, meaning as authorized by a majority of the Housing Commission, recommended by the Planning Board 7-0, recommended by the Select Board 3-0. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Hello, Will Reisig. I'd just like to ask if the select board has any preliminary ideas of how this $50,000 would be used within the Housing Commission. Would it be used to perform studies, to get into contact with other towns, or perform any other such functions? If you have any details that you could share with us, we very much appreciate that.
Thank you. That actually was a question that was asked at the budget meeting when this was proposed, and it could be used for grant writing, legal fees, probably not to purchase property, but any professional fees that may come up as a need. And without a starting balance to get this committee off, or commission off the ground, it sort of has their hands tied with only having conversations and not being able to do anything. So their 50,000 would be used directly towards looking to see if there are properties, if any grants available in town or in neighboring towns that Jackson could participate in. Scott, did I get everything kind of right on that one? I just don't want to miss opportunity on that.
Yeah, there's certainly a very long list of possible expenses. Bill actually put together a cover list. But that's really the job of the commission, is to come up with a plan, to make decisions as to how to spend that money, not necessarily to spend that money, but to come up with a plan where we hope we can make some progress, and having that money available will help us move forward with the plan that we work on. It requires a signature of the board, the select board. I think we have a long history between all the boards in Jackson of fiscal responsibility and not spending money unnecessarily. So I think that you can count on the fact that it will be spent wisely if we have it available. Thank you.
Jerry? Sorry.
He's not paying attention. Someone's going to. So I'm totally in favor of the Housing Commission, and I think it's a good thing. I personally would like to see the Housing Commission establish and develop a budget and propose to the select board, and then you decide whether that's a wise thing to spend it on or not. And Scott, you're absolutely right. I do trust every board in this town to judiciously spend their money and to think very wisely on it. There's a difference with this money, though. This money is non-lapsing. So at the end of the year, the Housing Commission keeps it. It doesn't come back to the taxpayer. Other boards in this town, when we appropriate money, if we didn't spend it, it goes back to the taxpayer. That does not, so you get to keep that money. And if political hacks such as myself can spin polls any way you want to. And if you were to ask me the question, what's the number one problem facing the town of Jackson? I will answer 9 times out of 10, lack of affordable housing. If you were to ask me, what's the most important thing for us to spend our money on? Affordable housing would be the very bottom of the list. Mostly from the standpoint of, I am very much in favor of the town of Jackson working in the Mount Washington Valley as a whole, and this is something that this commission can do, and it's probably the most important work that the commission can do, is work as a regional problem, because that's where most of our solutions lie. What I am strongly opposed to is the town of Jackson, our town, becoming land developers and landlords. That I'm not interested in doing at all, because I don't think, no matter how much money we can spend or would like to spend on it, it's not going to solve the problem of affordable housing for the town of Jackson, nor for the Mount Washington Valley as a whole. I would be in favor of spending money for the Housing Commission in future dates when there's a clear plan on how to spend that money and exactly what that money is going to be spent for.
Any other comments?
Hold on, Bill.
I'm not speaking in favor or opposed of this, except I do have some experience in real estate, and I just had a property for rent on the market in Jackson. People wanted to rent it and said to me, I want to use it, I'm going to ski, I come up a lot with my family. When I'm not there, I'm going to short-term rent it. 3, 4 different people, and then the rest were brokers wanting to rent it from me to short-term rent it. The problem in Jackson is short-term rentals, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We live in an expensive tourist town, our values are going up, there's no affordable housing, and unless people, out of the goodness of their heart, want to rent, like people are saying to me, why do you want to not rent it short-term? And I'm looking to put people in town, maybe with kids, etc. But unless we have that, unless we have people who are just thinking that way, but a lot of people can't afford to think that way. So I think it's a little pie in the sky to think, we're going to all of a sudden create grants and people are going to be able to live in Jackson for less money. Unless people say, I'm going to take my property and make sure it goes to a family, it's not going to happen. That's my 2 cents.
Everything she says is true, but, we could maybe perhaps in some towns and cities across the country doing is incentivizing landlords to maybe give them a break in their taxes, or they're subsidized in some way to help out and help defray the cost of a new home or a rental in the town of Jackson. So it's possible. There were things to be, Bill probably could speak to it better than I can, but what we could look into and some of the things we're talking about as we move forward.
Bill?
Thank you. Bill Terry. All right, you voted to have a housing commission. Great. Now, what I've just heard is that from one of the speakers is that what you want to do for those folks is say it's going to be at least another year before you can begin to do something other than think about it. Because the way our process works is the only way you get funding is to go before the town meeting. And so what I've heard is that we shouldn't really have a housing commission. We really shouldn't care about affordable housing. We really shouldn't try. Because we're going to fail. And I hear that regularly, that we can't do this. I have to ask you, really? Do you really feel that there is nothing we can do housing happens in town now. It's very limited, it's very scarce, it's very precious. And those of you who are taking advantage of it, welcome. Are there more opportunities? There are more opportunities. But we have to have a housing commission that can function. That means they're gonna have to be able to pay for maybe legal fees. Maybe they're gonna have to pay for a surveyor. Maybe they're going to have to pay to help develop. There are folks in town who do want to have affordable housing and have the ability to assist. We don't have the facility in town right now to make that happen. You've now made one first step, and I'm just asking you to take the second step. Thank you.
Sarah?
I'm appreciative of the fact that it was brought up that we will not be getting this money back if they don't spend it. I guess they get to hold on to it. And I don't think that really anybody is opposed to affordable housing, but again, having the first step of forming the commission, seeing what they find through this commission, through other towns, and what can be done, then come to the town meeting next year with that information, or to the two budget hearings that they have prior to town meeting, and give us the information with what they found and how this money would be spent.
Any other comments?
Hello, Will Reisick again. First of all, I'd like to comment that I'm a staunch supporter of this housing commission and of funding it because of what it could represent for our town as a community. Second, I'd like to stress upon everyone attending this meeting that time is absolutely of the essence. With every passing year, costs of anything you could possibly imagine grow. What is stated in this warrant article as $50,000 could grow to a much more substantial number next year when it's brought up if it's not voted in today. And that could mean a much bigger impact on all of us, and most likely not for the better. So I'd like everyone to consider the potential consequences between voting this grant and approving it and seeing an immediate impact and potentially immediate results with the Housing Commission as it's newly developed and it starts, working, and the consequences of defeating the motion and having to wait another year to get the Housing Commission going and potentially experiencing roadblocks that could stunt its development. One last thing I'd like to mention is that as was previously stated, the Housing Commission does not necessarily need to focus on creating housing in Jackson. It could also turn its focus toward working with other communities, with other towns, and developing properties amongst them in order to benefit the entirety of the Mount Washington Valley community, not just Jackson. So I'd like people to take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
Jeanette Hyman. I don't know the appropriate terms to use, but the concern has been raised that if the money is not spent, it would not come back to the town. I'd like to propose an amendment to this article that states that the money is made available to them on the basis that it come back to the town if not spent.
I'll second that. Would the attorney like to comment on that change in that article?
Can I say no? I'm kidding. I actually have the statutes here in front of me, and so when I started to hear that comment, I started to read the statute. The statutes for the Housing Commission call for the custodian to be the tax collector and the entity to make the decisions about expenditure of that funds to be that housing commission itself. So I would have some concern as to the viability of that being inconsistent with the statute 674-44J. However, I guess what I would say is that town meeting can vote anything it wants, and then it's up to the governing body and council to make some of those decisions later on enforceability of those things. And lastly, if the housing commission is the body to make the decision on the funds, suppose town meeting could make it known now through the comment and question phase that they would want the housing commission to choose to return the money to the town if they themselves find that they have no effective use for it. So the bottom line is, I question whether that is consistent with the statute. The ability to return it back to the town.
Do you understand what you're saying? Any other
Sir, are you saying that according to this RSA, we cannot do what I had suggested?
I'm going to read it to you. I haven't researched it through the New Hampshire Supreme Court addressing the issue. I just have the statute. And what it says is that Roman number 2, 674-44J, Roman 2. The town treasurer, pursuant to RSA 4129, shall have custody of all monies in the housing fund and shall pay out the same only upon order of the housing commission. The disbursement of housing funds shall be authorized by a majority of the housing commission. I read that as at least suggestive of the fact that once the housing commission has that money, they are in charge of however it is dispersed, whether it be for legal fees, or a surveyor, or a realtor, or some other expert to evaluate these issues, or back to the town. Candidly, I'd have to see if the New Hampshire Supreme Court has weighed in on that, but the way I read that makes it suggestive to me, and I apologize that I'm not more definitive, that would not be permissible. That said, the other comment I made is that if the town body, the legislative body, wants to make that vote, and there are a number of votes that town bodies can make that are ultimately in the end advisory only, and then the governing body has some ability to carry that out or not. If that's the will of the legislative body, then it would be the governing body and my job to make that happen if legal. So I can't answer definitively now based on my reading of the statute. I would say I'm not sure, but that doesn't mean you can't vote it in and we figure it out later. And that's okay.
To clarify that, the state says that there's no decision that you could make that would be illegal. Whether it would be enforceable or not, am I going to try to correct you? Is that right? That's another matter.
Yeah, this is going to sound funny, but there's absolutely no such thing in reality as an illegal vote at the legislative meeting. It's just whether it is ultimately advisory or binding or enforceable or not. And so that's the beauty of town meeting, is that the legislative body can make its will known, and then if it's legal, then you can do it.
So then would it be appropriate to amend this article to add the request that any unused funds be returned, or I'm not sure the appropriate language.
Appropriateness, I suppose, is in the eyes and ears of the seat holders within this meeting, meaning that perhaps the best way that amendment could be worded is such that with a recommendation that the Housing Commission choose to return the money if it can't find an appropriate use for it, and that puts the onus on the entity charged with making those decisions. And if, at the end of the day, the legal research that I would potentially need to do supports that, then that would be a way to take care of it. You can make the amendment however you want, But that sort of language, I think, gives, in my opinion, the greatest flexibility to allow it to possibly occur the way you'd like, based on your motion. So I guess the bottom line is, for me, I don't want to overstep for me to tell you how to make that motion, but I think the motion would be best worded to give the commission the authority to give it back.
Okay, I don't want to press this any further if there isn't a general idea that this is something we feel is important. In other words, any unspent funds could come back to the town. Any other comments, please?
Thank you.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? Was there a motion and a second made on the floor already?
Yes.
I believe there was.
Yes.
So could I
Act
act
on it first.
say that?
You have to act on it first.
Yeah.
The amendment first.
Right, so I'd like to ask if we could rescind that motion and consider talking about this further before we make another motion and ratify it. Can we do that, please?
So the legislative body can do anything it wants.
I just think if there was a motion and a second, but we're still trying to decide what the right way to do this, I think it was a little premature.
I'm not commenting on the money, I'm commenting on the procedure. Again, the legislative body can do what it wants. It can amend this up or down, or it can put different constraints on it. Whether or not that would be enforceable is another issue. I think Jeanette was asking that there be a constraint on the money. If they don't use it, it would go back to the town, much the way a non-lapsing article would be. But as a body, you can make a motion, and the motion has been moved and seconded. I don't know that we can ask the attorney yet, but I don't think we can remove that, can we?
One of the things we can do is vote the amendment motion down and then insert the second amendment motion.
That's what I wanted to do.
Would you like to make a motion then?
Yes, but you want to address the first motion first.
We need to vote on that motion.
Okay, can we move and second Jeanette's?
It's already been done.
It's been seconded.
Okay.
Can I rescind my amendment?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
If she rescinds her motion, I'll rescind the second, but I would like to speak to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to rescind my amendment.
Thank you, Jeanette.
I would rescind mine.
You still have the floor.
Yes, Donna Dunn, and I would like to make an amendment to the motion that instead of 50,000, it be 15,000, so there's money to work with, but it doesn't seem like such a significant amount.
Motion second?
I second.
So we have a motion on the floor to amend Article 8 from 50,000 to 15,000. This is only on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? All right, I'm gonna separate it by this side of the room. Can you guys count, please?
Yes. And can we ask all in favor again to please stand up and hold your cards high? Thank you.
This is in favor of the amendment.
Okay.
In favor of the amendment.
That's okay. That's okay. I have 29 left.
Did you guys get both sides?
Can you repeat what we're doing? Because I think
All right, my understanding of the procedure is the amendment is to Article 8, which is $50,000. The amendment is to amend it to $15,000. So we're in favor of this, would reduce it from 50 to 15. I'll ask again, who's in favor of that? On this side of the room.
I got the count on the in favor. Can I see the opposed? Please. Okay. You know what? Yeah, okay.
All the motion to amend the article to 15,000.
Oh my gosh.
We almost lost Willis Kelly.
Just testing her.
Okay. The amendment to amend Article 8 from 50,000 to 15,000 has passed, 50 to 45. So the amendment carries. So now I'm going to reread the article. To establish, Article 8, to establish a housing fund to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $15,000 for a housing fund for the initial funding of the Town of Jackson Housing Commission. If so established, this amount to come from the general taxation and further to name the treasurer as the custodian of the funds to expend from said housing fund consistent with RSA 674:44J, meaning as authorized by a majority of the Housing Commission, recommended by the Planning Board 7-0, the Select Board 3-0. Now we're voting for 15,000, not 15,000. Everybody understand that? All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Can you make the adjustment in the number? Thank you. Article 9, Library Maintenance and Repairs Expendable Trust Fund. To see if the town will vote to establish a library maintenance and repairs expendable trust fund for the, under the provision of RSA 31:13-A, repairs and maintenance of the library infrastructure, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 to be placed in said fund. Further, to name the library trustees as agents to expend from said fund. Recommended by the library trustees 5-0, recommended by the select board 3-0. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Sir.
Ed Tompkins, I'm treasurer of the library trustees. Just wanted to comment a little bit. The library in its current form is 13 plus years old. We do not have a capital reserve fund to handle contingencies. This request for $10,000 is just to cover that hole, and it's a one-time request in the instance that we cannot anticipate and schedule a major repair or maintenance item. As far as I'm concerned, we don't have anything likely to happen again in the near future. So this is a one-time request that will stand until it's needed. This was brought into focus in particular this year when our air conditioning system failed without any capital reserve. Through the good offices of our wonderful town clerk and our board of select persons, we were able to handle it without having to cut back on services or expenditures. So hopefully that will justify this one-time expense. Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none. Article 9, Library Maintenance and Repairs Expendable Trust Fund. To see if the town will vote to establish a Library Maintenance and Repairs Trust Fund under the provision RSA 31:19-A for repairs and maintenance of the library infrastructure, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 to be placed in said fund. Further, to name the library trustees as agents to expend from such fund. Recommended. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 16, new fire station design and engineering study. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $250,000 for the purpose of conducting a design and engineering study to determine the cost of a new fire station to be located between the current fire station and the town offices. Recommended by the select board 3-0.
So moved. Second.
Discussion.
I'm Andrew Tullis again. My question has to do with the follow-up from the last, the meeting at the fire station. I specifically asked, were there only 2 viable locations? I was told it was the parking lot and the current location. Now all of a sudden there's another viable location and you want $250,000 to spend money on that. So my concern is, are there other viable locations? Because things have changed. I understand why you said no to the one that was previous. I just don't know how this all of a sudden became viable when previously it wasn't.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. In 2020, a feasibility report was produced by a group of committee members that came together to look and assess the needs of our current fire and rescue facility. And there were 5 different alternatives that were identified. One was rebuilding on site. One was rebuilding south of the library where there's a current parking lot. And then there were 3 other options that were identified in some way, shape, or form, put into the area between the current fire station and the town office where the service road is up to the highway department. All 3 of those options by the committee were assessed and not recommended. They were all doing the same thing. They were taking a 100-foot wide floor plan of a 1-story fire station that was 80 feet deep and trying to shoehorn that into that spot. And if you know the spot I'm talking about, where there's like 5 or 6 public parking spaces between those 2 buildings, that could not support something that wide. So they turned it, and they had it coming out to the service road, and everything they looked at was monstrous as far as creating a lot of asphalt and parking areas behind the current station. The road back into the town highway department had to be restructured at an expense that added a cost prohibitive amount compared to the other locations onto those costs of those, and that's why none of those locations were seen as one of the top choices for a newly constructed fire station. When we started looking at it last April, this issue, we looked at a renovation plan also where the current site is, to upgrade the facility to provide for the adequacy of some of the needs that currently aren't being met. And we looked at the location that was south of the library. The new construction project at the current site was dismissed. We had nowhere to store the rolling equipment. We had no ability to house much of the fire and rescue services anywhere in town, and those trucks require heat because they have tanks on them, because we have to have fire trucks with tanks and hoses to serve our community where there aren't fire hydrants in reach, and so none of that was really realistic. And so that wild card of how are we going to store this equipment for 18 to 24 months was not costed out in any way, shape, or form. What they did cost out was simply the site work and the construction and the contingency amount. So we didn't feel that was something we could go in front of the voters with tonight that was realistic. We looked at a renovation plan on site. We looked at expanding out back of that current station, because you can't upgrade the facility based on the existing needs that have been identified in that feasibility study without adding square footage. There's nowhere to put a gear room. There's nowhere to put a decontamination room. There's nowhere to put a fairly decent size, there's no maintenance shop, there's no washing area separation, all of these things that you need to have for a fire station serving a town of this size in the 21st century. There was too much missing to do it without expanding the footprint. So we identified what could be done with a renovation. Unfortunately, if you know the history of that site, it used to be the highway department also, and the salt shed out there on the other side of the salt shed was where the diesel pumps were. And over time, that ground, which is primarily low wetland area, was saturated with diesel fuel. There is no hope that we could get the site work done that would be necessary to expand the station out back with that ground not addressed. That soil's going to have to be removed at an exorbitant amount. It's going to make renovation cost prohibitive. We had a $2.1 million renovation estimate that did not consider that inlet. So there was an added cost onto that had me convinced it was not going to be feasible to renovate and upgrade that facility. So we looked again at the space between the fire station and the police station. It wasn't going to fit with the floor plan, so let's do a site-specific floor plan. And we spent $12,500 since the first of the year on civil engineering services, who is also our town engineer, Burr Phillips, and Mike Couture Architect, who was the architect for the highway department building. And we had them develop a site-specific station, and that's what you see here tonight. That's the floor plan, those are the elevation plans, and then you see the renderings in the back. So it is a downsized station because that big floor plan would just blow a hole in our site development costs with all of the dirt that we'd have to move out of the way and the roads that we'd have to reconstruct. So this doesn't do that. We can leave the access road the way it is. We can go in with a thinner station. It's a 2-story station. There's no way out the back because the back is still going to be underground level. And there's going to be a 30-foot by 72-foot second floor. We're going to get, it's going to be ADA compliant because it can be accessed from the current parking lot area, which will also be expanded. And if you saw Burr's site placement, you saw a little bit of a parking lot over there, and the back of that second story will open up onto the parking area. So we costed that out, and we came up with a $3.33 million construction project. We contacted the person that we've been working with as a consultant for the construction end of the project. It's $350 a square foot this year. And he said, I can hold that number for the entirety of the building. Typically, a second story is a little bit less money than a ground story, but a ground floor. But he said, $350 for the entirety of the square footage is going to work. And then we had civil engineering come up with the engineer's cost estimate, which was $627,592, and we added the recommended contingency amount to the project of $197,909. So this project, as it's currently costed out right now, will add up to $4,156,101. Still right where we intended to bond for. Because it's downsized, we can use the bays out back that have been used in the past for the highway department and where the forestry truck is stored. We can still store some stuff in those bays, and that allowed us to downsize it. And frankly, we felt like a big concession would be to not have that open up in the back with this big, huge, wide, paved area behind it. So site location and going out the back were two things we felt we needed to address. So that's how we got to where we are today with this recommendation. So the feasibility study identified 5 options. This study is how we intend to cost out and plan for the entirety of the project. We sacrificed $80,000 under the capital fire engine equipment fund. We we took that out this year in order to justify the $250,000 request. We will come back next year with a bond for the amount because we'll have a year to come up and with that total cost. And that's the proposal before you today.
Any questions? Sarah?
The site change, I'd just like to ask the one question, when you have, why behind the library where there's no digging, there's no moving, which is gonna cost us probably hundreds of thousands of dollars to do where you want the site, why that proposal of over behind the library fell through?
It's a great question, in a sense, because it was the same reason that we took the renovation off the table. It just wasn't supportable. Back when that library was sited, it maybe was not where certain people felt it would end up, but it ended up where it ended up, and it's just crowding into that stream next to it, and it's a little bit, it's just too close. And so part of what we need here is a support for a bond. And if we don't have enough support to locate something over there, then we need to see that, and we need to be pragmatic about that, and we need to pivot. And so we have pivoted to this project proposal in front of you right now, site-specific, located in there because it's not as wide and it's deep and it doesn't have the rear exits. It's not taking up nearly the footprint. It's still on the town campus, which was the intention of the select board in 1988 when they bought that property at a special meeting that was scheduled, and I'm sure many of you were here at that time. It was felt that that is where, when the time comes, relocating the police station and the town office and the library would make sense. And the feasibility study in 2021 that cited all of these deficiencies and code violations that our current station has means the time has come.
Can I just further that through? So are you saying to me that during meetings that you had prior to this, or with the fire department persons and the library persons, that the decision was made that because it was going to be looked upon by the library or be set in there, which would save us a phenomenal amount in taking out the dirt and so on and so forth, that due to the thought of the persons that you spoke to at the time, that they made, or you as a whole made the decision in the fire department that that's not where it was going to go?
No. These decisions have been made by the select board, and where we started with was an assessment for a project that we could bond. And we presented to boards and commissions and committees around town. We put together an 8-minute long informational video that was viewed by 175 people. We did our best to increase awareness for the need and to identify where all the deficiencies were so everybody could understand where those deficiencies were, and to put out what we felt at that time were the two best options. And they both ended up off the table, one because of soil contamination and one because there was no confidence that it would fit there and not impact other things on the town campus. The town campus was the will of the voters to house a new fire station when the time came. So we sharpened our pencils and we took out our magnifying glasses and we took another look at that site. So rather than have the rolling equipment empty out onto that service road before it came out onto Route 16A there, we ended up facing it to the road, just like the one is now, so we don't have to mess with that and we get rid of all those construction costs. And I will say that the total cost estimate, because there was a lot of site work that was going to have to happen next to the library. There was going to have to be a relocation of the septic, and really to separate it, there was going to need to be retaining walls constructed and fill brought in, so it wasn't going to be as cheap as we thought. So the total cost estimate of that site with that original 100-foot wide by 80-foot deep building that opened up into the back and circled around in the front was $4,094,000. And I just told you that currently, and this is the same costing process that that other building was costed out at, that this is $4,156,101. So it's $70,000 difference or something like that. So, and so that pragmatic pivot also included the logical discussion of, over the course of a 20-year bond, which we would intend to come back with next year with a shovel-ready project with this warrant passing, over the course of a 20-year bond, a $70,000 difference is basically negligible. And that's why we're here tonight asking you for your support on this warrant article, because we intend to come back in 12 months with a bond that's going to require a supermajority, and it will be shovel-ready with this project planning that this warrant will allow us to do.
Any other discussion?
So I just want some clarification, Jerry, Dr. again. Are you saying that you're proposing a smaller building that costs more, and that's why you moved it to the current location that you're considering? Or did I mishear that?
No. There's a site work difference, there's a construction difference with the 2 floors, and so it's basically right there in the ballpark.
Right.
And that's what the best we know today. We got these numbers within the last 2 weeks that we contacted our general contractor who we've been working with, and had our civil engineering firm give us the costing out of what that would be.
And I appreciate that, and I'm guessing that the number you got for this building is probably much more accurate because of that. I'm just trying to follow your logic, which I'm a little bit lost on, meaning that you stated that you didn't consider the south of the library site because it wasn't cost effective, and you're proposing now to build a smaller building for $70,000 more. That I'm a little confused about.
Yeah, I can understand that, because if I said it wasn't cost effective, I misspoke. I said it was not supported, and it was not supported for a number of reasons. The new building on the current location was without question not going to be cost effective, and it also didn't even consider where we're going to house the rolling equipment. There were a myriad of reasons that there wasn't confidence in enough people in this town that location south of the library was gonna make sense.
That makes sense to me. I just was confused with Sarah's comment. I'm trying to, did you move it from south of the library because you knew people weren't supportive of that? And you said, no, that wasn't the reason. You said it was because it was more cost effective to put it somewhere else. But it isn't more cost effective to put it somewhere else. It's less cost effective because we're getting a smaller building for more money.
It's a better decision to be, that can be supported by the
And
town.
that's fair enough, but I would also like to clarify, when the town purchased that land, it was to construct a public works building that included a fire station, a police station, and the town offices and an emergency facility. That's what we proposed back then, and I think as Frank would recall too, that when we discussed these things back then, we also decided that even if we didn't do those things, it still made sense to purchase that land.
That's correct.
But we're a new town now, and this town gets to decide how we use that land, and these are all proposals I think that are really smart. I think that in the process of building a fire station or any building through town, I think it's really good to ask for the design money up front in this regard. And it's also really fair for you to state back to us that you're gonna come back to us in 12 months and ask us for the bond. So it would be really silly for us to support this and then not support a bond later. And thank you for your honesty in telling us you're asking for a new fire station for this. That's what's being proposed here. It's not just to design one, it's because we're gonna be asking to build one someday.
Any other comments?
Andrew and Bill. Andrew, did you want to come up, and then Willis after Andrew?
So that we don't lose Willis again, you want to take a moment?
Just one more quick follow-up,
Uh-huh.
because I pretty much understood most of what you said. When you were going to the parking lot, when you were on that, one of the advantages of that site was it had potential room for growth, so that the building itself, even though it was scaled for 50 years, you thought you had the capability to expand it after that. Based on where you're putting this location, sounds like you're in a shoebox. So what's the life expectancy of this building? And is there room? Or when this one's done, I go back to square one with a new site? I mean, I'm gonna be dead by then. Just,
unfortunately, I'm with you.
I think one thing that's important to state too is that the amount of vehicles and rolling equipment that the fire department has had for many, many years has not increased, with the exception of the UTV that they purchased. So as far as that growth goes, the thing that would be considerable would be the size of the new engines as they come in, which we've already experienced. But it does leave the option of the old fire station for doing that in the future, and then it does leave the property by the library available for other town use. So if we do have to move the town office for something, I think we have a lot of options left over by still having that other property available.
well,
And nobody
I'm
can
really
predict
about
the
just the
future.
fire station and how you would use that, not
Yep.
what we might do with other property. Because one of the advantages of the design, the previous design, was it had a lot of room for the expanded sizes of the new vehicles and additional growth of the vehicles.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that we're not forcing something into a shoebox here, and we still have that capability to use bigger equipment down the road, and potentially more.
Yeah, thank you. Bill, stand please. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? I usually am loud enough without this, but anyway, I'll make it quick. Just an FYI on a couple of points. So like Thompson said, 2020, there are people in this room and people that are no longer with us, God rest their souls, and people that are not in this room that have worked on this project starting back in the late 2017, and a lot of discussions. And if you remember the survey that was sent out, and we had a pretty good sized meeting here last year to go through that. It was a pretty good presentation. If you looked at the results and the categories, 3 of the 5 categories was basically the fire station needs to be addressed by, what, 300 people, thereabouts? And that's what we're doing. The longer we put it off, the more it's gonna cost. There's no question, general contractors of size that could build this in Maine and New Hampshire. I've talked to a lot of them in 49 years of this building business, and they're all saying that building costs are not gonna go down anytime soon. And the bond, if we did the major renovation, the 10-year bond would be the same cost per year as the 20-year bond building a new station, as well as even with a renovated station, we still have a problem with housing equipment that has to, trucks and all the equipment on it that has to come out of that building at times for renovation. And we have nowhere to put it. And just so you know, if that, in the state of Maine and the state of New Hampshire in 2023, there was 3 fire stations burned down to the ground with equipment in them. That building, as you now know, no matter what we do, if we build new, we're talking in the $4 million range. And the equipment that would be lost and the trucks that would be lost in that, you couldn't replace today for probably $7 million. So you got a lot of risk of an unprotected, non-compliant building, and you got an opportunity to solve that. We just talked about the importance of family housing in this town, and I think everybody in the room is probably love to see the study done on it with the commission, but anybody that looks at any land that's available for a developer, there's no way he's gonna build it for affordability here. It's just not gonna happen in the near future. This is an important step in this direction, as Bob said. So if we vote this down, we go back to the drawing board for next year, and the design's not gonna change, the cost is gonna go up, and it still puts it back on an 18-month plus construction problem, and what do we do in the meantime? I think the chief will tell you a few things that the building has to have right now without doing anything, but I'll let him weigh on that. There is a lot of problems with the existing 80-year-old building.
I recognize Jay.
To answer his question, we do have room for growth in this new location. Out back, kind of the same as we were thinking of the existing fire station location that we talked about. That is a big advantage of this over by the library. There was no ability to grow over there. We did away with the drive-through capability, which actually, there's some negatives and positives to that, but we gained some space that way. So to answer your question, we did consider that, and there's a lot more space behind that section that goes towards the highway garage. So that was much more user-friendly and ability to do later if we need to do something. And the little misconception is when Bob said the building's smaller, it's the apparatus area is what's a little bit smaller. And then we've got the back upstairs up here. So it's about the same size as it was, total square footage. Maybe a hair bigger. So when he said that, it's mostly the apparatus bay, the big, high, massive part of the building was what was a little bit smaller compared to the other plans, but plenty of room.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, Article 10, new fire station design and engineering study to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $250,000 for purpose of conducting a design and engineering study to determine the cost of a new fire station to be located between the current fire station and the town offices. Been moved and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion carries. Article 11, highway sand enclosure roof, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $290,000 for the purpose of building a roof over the sand exposure and the highway garage. Recommended by the board, 3-0.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Well, this is, you talk about upgrading infrastructure, this is something
Yeah,
that's
here you
done.
go.
You're right. talking about that in other different buildings, but we have to create better working conditions for our guys down there. I mean, if you can imagine, what is it, Gary, 8 to 10 hours sometimes before a storm, breaking up frozen sand and mixed with salt for the roads, it takes multiple hours, and generally the weather conditions are horrible. It just makes sense to make better working conditions and a more efficient situation up there for the highway department. Gary, you want to maybe touch a little bit on, Gary is our road agent, by the way.
Hello, everybody. The town road agent here in Jackson. My name's Gary Allen. The process, well, I should start out. We have a concrete containment area up there right now with 7-foot high walls. We want to actually finish the building that started 14 years ago. We should have had a roof on then. With all the rain that we had this summer, our flood that we had this December, our highway sand was totally saturated with water. Winter came, we have a big pile of frozen sand up there now. The process for us to get it so we can use it on our highways, first we have to clean the snow off the sand pile, then we have to break into the sand pile, and by that I mean there will be frost frozen 6 to 12 inches on top of that pile. We have to break that away, big huge chunks, we pile them off to the side. We dig into a pile, we have a screen, we have to screen every bit of our sand through that. At that point, we put it inside of our salt shed. We have enough room for about 1 storm of storage in there. We spent a full day with 1 man in the wheel loader running all day long to get that sand moved inside, screened, and out of the weather. Maybe 2 or 3 days, maybe a week before the next storm comes, the sand freezes again in that building. It's still in cold. So when the storm comes, we screen it again, load it in the truck, and then the sand being the condition that it's in, it freezes as we're out on the road applying the sand. So by the end of the storm, there's a considerable amount of sand that's frozen in our truck bodies. When we're done plowing and treating the roads at the end of the storm, we bring our vehicles inside, we let them thaw, and as soon as they thaw, we take them back out, we dump the sand out of them, and we pressure wash them to get the sand and salt off them, and then we put them away. Depending on what time of the day it is, we may go home or we may sleep at the highway garage. Immediately after the storm, the next morning, we have to be out early to treat for the bus routes and the people going to work. Sarah?
It's my understanding at the meeting that you were also maybe going to have room, for other equipment or...
Yes, exactly. I mean, once we have this enclosure enclosed, I mean, we store about 2,000 yards of sand there for a winter process. If it was out of the weather, we won't have to store 2,000 yards of sand, because by springtime, a large amount, not quite half, but close to half amount of our sand is froze solid in big chunks we piled off to the side. There would be more than enough room to put a bay in this new enclosure. We could move all of our equipment out of the grazing garage down there next to Flossie's. We'd have it all in one location, and then that property and building could be used for other town uses. Then I guess another feature benefit was it's going to be a shed type roof, and it's all southerly facing, so we could load that up with solar panels like we have at the highway garage. We have solar panels on our salt shed, there's solar panels on the town office. So there's opportunity there to reap benefits from having solar.
Thank you.
I guess, I mean, one other thing I guess I can point out, we have a cost of $290 to construct that. We're deferring our truck fund and heavy equipment fund for just 1 year. I mean, all of our equipment's in very good shape, most of it's new. So that brings it down to actually $210,000 is what we need. Over time, between the savings of fuel and labor and machine wear, it would pay for itself. So I hope you all can feel good about supporting this. Thank you.
Article 11, highway sand and enclosure roof. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $290,000, for the purpose of building a roof over the sand enclosure at the highway garage. All in favor? All opposed? The motion carries. Article 12, social services petition. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,000 for the way station for the purpose of continuing and providing safe and welcoming, non-judgmental space and supportive for voices non-judgmental space and support services for the homeless and housing insecure in Mount Washington Valley. Petitioned article.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is the person who petitioned this here? Jeanette?
My name is Jeanette Heidman. Myself and 5 other volunteers consist of the board of the way station. We've been operating for almost 5 years. We started out, I think, with an annual budget of about $30,000. We're now up to $300,000. We service around 35 individuals or families per week. We provide food for those people sleeping in their cars. We provide gas carts. We provide laundry cards so people can dry out their clothing, clean their clothing. Many of our clients have jobs. It's a very difficult situation. We don't have a lot of homeless people from Jackson, but we're part of the valley, and we're going to multiple towns asking for these funds this year. It's the first time we've done this, and we felt it was time, one, to broaden the awareness for what we're doing, and second, to just try to supply some of that $300,000 that we go through pretty quickly.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any other questions? Article 12, social services petition. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,000 for the way station for the purpose of continuing to provide safe, welcoming, non-judgmental space and supportive services for the homeless and housing insecure in Mount Washington Valley. All in favor? Opposed? Article 12 carries. Article 13, to reestablish the transfer station dumpster petition. To see if the town of Jackson, New Hampshire will vote to direct the Jackson Select Board to reestablish the long-standing taxpayer service of a dumpster at the Bartlett Jackson Transfer Station. This article is contingent upon Bartlett, New Hampshire also approving the reestablishment of the transfer station. Dumpster petitioned article. Recommended by the Select Board 120. Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Could I make some comments before the public comments, Jerry?
Yes.
Who
is saying?
I'm right here. Jerry. Jerry.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's past my bedtime.
Although the select board did not fully support this petition article, I just want to make it known that we are not opposed to reopening the dump store because it is a valuable resource and has been for so many years. What we need is a different option on how to reopen it. The Bartlett Select Board posted in Saturday's paper a letter to the editor about some of the examples of the horrible disrespect that was happening in the dump store. We had a meeting in October on how to reopen the dump store, staffing it with volunteers, and that sort of fell by the wayside. It didn't amount to anything that was going to be feasible to reopen the dump store. I still think there are ways to do it. I don't support the petition warrant article because we shouldn't be forced to just reopen the dump store. We should be asked how to reopen the dump store or come up with a feasible alternative to have some kind of way for either members of Just Jackson or Jackson and Bartlett to use household goods or whatever that belong in a dump store. So there are many options, and there's a meeting on April 7th between the two select boards where we'd like to come up with other options on how to reopen the dump store. We talk about this probably 4 times a week at our dinner table on options on how to do this. If we do 1 weekend a month, if we do a town swap 4 times a year, what can we do to reopen this? So please don't think that we are against opening the dump store. We want Bob Blake and his staff to be respected and treated with dignity when they deal with people at the dump store. They have been so disrespected and treated just horribly with people not doing things right there. So I'd love to not have this be a contentious discussion about the dump store tonight, because I have never seen so much passion in the town about something that has no dollar value attached to it. So thank you all for your passion. I really appreciate that. I would like to suggest that you all come to the April 7th meeting or contact me or any of the select board before then with options on how to get this done, either at the dump or transfer station or at another alternative location. And believe me, I have like 5 boxes in my garage, would love a solution to this. So that's my 2 cents on the petitioned warrant article. Again, I appreciate the passion. I appreciate the arguments. I don't think we should be forced to reopen it the way it was done before.
Any other comments? Hearing none. Article.
Wait, Red.
Oh, sorry.
Brent Tompkins, I just want to say I wholeheartedly agree with everything Barb has said. I believe in my heart and soul that good, faithful people in the town, at the transfer station, and in Bartlett can come up with viable solutions to handle this issue. The employees at the transfer station, they have been abused, and they've been having to do things that they shouldn't have due to a bunch of inconsiderate people who didn't pay attention and didn't think the rules applied to them. I believe that we can come up in a fairly short time with at least a trial plan to get this opened again, and if it's not perfect, move it a little bit forward from that point. But it's such a beloved institution that I just can't see not happening.
Article 13, reestablish transfer station dump store. Petition to see if the town of Jackson, New Hampshire will vote to direct the Jackson Select Board to reestablish longstanding taxpayer service of a dump store at the Bartlett Jackson Transfer Station. This article is contingent upon Bartlett, New Hampshire also approving the reestablishment transfer station. All in favor? Opposed?
Looks like it passed.
I agree. Article 13 passes. Article 14, any other business, to act upon any other business which may legally come before this meeting.
Jerry? Yes. This is just a reminder more than anything. A couple of years ago, I started putting together a spreadsheet, because I'm an accountant, of all the volunteers in the town of Jackson. And I had got up to about 125 individuals that give their time to at least one committee, and I ran out of space, time, and names. So on a Saturday morning at the Whitney Center here, we will be holding a volunteer recognition breakfast with pancakes cooked by Greg and Bridget. So I would love to see so many faces here, and I do want to thank everyone who gives their time and energy to all of the different nonprofits in Jackson, to our town, in the valley, etc. So if you can make it on Saturday from 8 to 10, please try to make it, and thank you always, even if you can't make it for whatever what you do in town. That's
Any other comments? I have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Oh, sorry, wait.
No, I was just gonna thank Greg, who really was the person who spearheaded improving the sound system. I think it went great. I love the music when we came in, and the pictures up there. It felt great. Thank you, Greg.
And Ron. Have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Meeting is dissolved.